Good afternoon, everybody. It's Jim Milhausen, and we are here for session 1 entitled The Principles of Sales Virtualization. We're going to go ahead and begin the 5-part program. And with that, I started thinking about this, and I said, you know what? Let's not overcomplicate what we're trying to do here. We're really only trying to do 2 things with the Sales Virtualization program. And one, we want to sell more stuff. And secondly, we want to lower the cost of doing it. And the internet has made a lot of things complicated, but digital assets and the internet have made it very possible to lower the cost of selling products, and done right, which is what we're here to talk about, we can also sell more. So it's really only about 2 things: selling more for less cost. How do we do that? I think that there's 3 ways that we go about doing that. And the first is that we get more leads. If we had more leads, we would probably sell more products. The second thing we need to do is we need to close the leads that we do have better than we're currently closing them. We're strivers as entrepreneurs, so I'm guessing we all think that we can close leads better. And thirdly, we want to lower the cost of doing so. We want to identify the legacy systems that may be wasting money, but meaning let's stop selling like it's 1985 stuff, re-engineer the supply chain, and change a little bit of how we go about selling these. And this is what we're going to cover today. Is this right here. I do have one caveat, and my caveat is this entire program, this sales virtualization stuff, will not work if you're not willing to do a couple of things. Number one, if you're not willing to be statistical about this, meaning if we went to, let's call it the roulette table, and I gave you 3-to-1 odds on red or black, and then asked you how much would you like to bet, your answer should be all of it, because the odds of winning are 50-50, and I just gave you triple odds. You should be willing to bet big when the odds are in your favor, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to stack the deck, meaning if a lead, whether it be a qualified lead, an unqualified lead, someone who's almost ready to purchase, or a customer, is worth X amount of money, let's call it $1,000, and we can generate that for $500, we want to generate as many of those as humanly possible. But sometimes I see entrepreneurs who insist on only ultra-high margin transactions, meaning, well, I got this $500,000 customer playing golf, and it didn't cost me anything to get them, so why should I spend $10,000 to acquire a customer like that when I can get them for nothing? The reason that you want to do that is because it's non-duplicable. That a lot of our great customers, we got them through ways that are non-duplicable. The good news about what we're doing with sales virtualization is it's all duplicable. The bad news is it's probably going to be more expensive than these easy layups or bluebirds that you have in your system now. And I see way too many entrepreneurs who insist on getting more of what they already have, and it just is impossible. So we're not going to play that game. Let's get started. Goal number 1, getting more leads. The first thing that we need to do to get more leads is to find new lead sources. Traditional lead sources, for most of us, continue to be less and less effective. Things like traditional advertising, cold calling and telemarketing, direct mail, the yellow pages is nearly dead. Referrals and networking, all of these traditional sources for most of us. We've got 25 people on the call here. I can't cover everybody, and I know some people may say, networking works for me. Great. If networking works for you is great, but if we're talking about a proven and repeatable sales process, networking needs to work when it's not you, the owner, doing the network. That's proven and repeatable. You doing more networking just makes you a slave to networking and doing more and more of that, and eventually you run out of lunches and breakfasts to do more networking. But in general, those sources we probably want to do less of, or maybe we can virtualize them and be more effective doing what you're doing for less cost. The new sources that continue to be more and more important are things like SEO, pay-per-click, reputation management, PR, and social media. And in general, one of these interests me much more than all the others because I think it's an umbrella category. And believe it or not, it's reputation management. Because what reputation management is, your appearance out there in the buying environment, and whether that be on Google, social media, trade magazines, PR, most of these fit as a subcategory, in particular, social media. A lot of businesses scoff when you talk about the importance of social media, and I think that I'm with you. For most of us, Twitter's a waste of time. For most of us, Facebook is a waste of time. For most of us, even LinkedIn is a waste of time. But from a reputation management perspective, none of those are a waste of time. That we need to do 10% of what everybody's telling us to do, not 100%, but the trick is what 10%, and we'll talk specifically about what we need to do. But we do need to manage our reputation. That is a way to get more leads and keep and convert the leads that we do have. How do we traditionally sell? We traditionally go out there and we tell people, these are the features and benefits of my product, that our widget has 37 features. And then we educate them on how to use our product. Well, if you'll use our hammer and swing it at a 47-degree angle, you can pound 34% more nails with our hammer. And the prospect's far too ADD to listen to any of the how-tos, the features and benefits, and listen to the things that we think they want to know. What we need to do instead is focus on the things that they think that they want to know. Had a client that I remember wrote this down when we talked about it. Why not what? The prospect doesn't care what you have. The customer cares why. They want a hammer for a reason. It's the why they want the hammer, not what your hammer does. You may remember during the preview, I talked about connecting the dots. What is connecting the dots? You tell the client the 34 reasons why the hammer is really important, and you want them to connect the dots and get the why. What we need to do is skip that dot connecting and get straight to that why of what is important to the customer. The second thing that I want you to remember is that we're going to market what they want, and then we're going to sell them what they need. Remember me talking in the preview call about the franchise consultants and where the receptivity was? And one of the things that really drove him insane was all these people that were trying to recreate a $50,000 program for $99. Well, what they needed was a $50,000 program, but there was no receptivity to that. But when we started marketing what they wanted, which was a $99 do-it-yourself program, we started selling a lot more of what they needed, a $50,000 program. And we use a sales virtualization program to do that. Wide funnel for $99 people, the highest point of receptivity, filter, 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 and inevitably more people come out that are willing to spend 50 grand starting with 99 than the other way, which was starting at 50. Here's what you need, here's what you need. Prospects don't care what they need. They care what they want. And that's why we're going to focus on receptivity. So I have a little chart here that we use. And this is one of the exercises. I gave you 9 exercises. You got a link a couple of hours ago on this. And these are designed to be done after we talk, not before, so no worries if you haven't done these. But if you have them, you can go ahead and look at them. And this is what we call the marketing sweet spot exercise. And so here's what we'll do on this. Think about what your prospect is receptive to. And that may be getting pricing from you before you want to give it. That may be stealing your intellectual property. That may be touring your plant. That may be they're bored and want somebody to buy them lunch. I don't know what they're receptive to. But with what you do is, with no regard to selling anything, that's the tricky part, with no regard to selling anything, what is your prospect receptive to? Secondly, we'll move over to kind of that pinkish circle. What is your perceived expertise? If my clients are interested in breeding Rottweilers, I have no expertise in breeding Rottweilers, nor can I even be perceived to be an expert in breeding Rottweilers, so that's not going to work. However, I may or may not be an expert at marketing strategies for air conditioner companies, but I probably can be perceived to be somewhat of an expert there in that I have a lot of experience with companies of that size. I have a lot of experience with companies in construction, and I have a lot of experience with companies trying to use marketing to sell more. So therefore, I probably can get a check mark next to having perceived expertise in HVAC marketing. And then the last circle on this exercise is the mode that we're going to use. And that's all the things that we talked about before. Are we going to use pay-per-click? Are we going to use television advertising? Are we going to use direct mail, telemarketing, inside sales, outside sales? Any of the modes. How are we going to get our message that the client is receptive to them? And that yields what we call the marketing sweet spot. So there's a point where all of these come together, and you can see that money sign in the middle. So there's a point where we hit the marketing sweet spot, that the receptivity of the client hits where you're perceived to be an expert and in a mode that you can get to them cost effectively, and that's where your marketing sweet spot is. And so that's what that exercise will hopefully give you, is where is your marketing sweet spot? Another exercise that we gave you is better leveraging what has historically worked. It is always surprising to me. I have done this exercise with many, many clients, and clients have made a lot of money doing this silly exercise. It may take 20, by the way. Then we'll call it the top 10. Maybe you'll get that. So there's a 5-page exercise in there called client analysis. And what you will do is you will list your top 10 or 20 clients. How you will know to do 10 or 20 is we're trying to find a pattern. And once you get the aha, you're done. Maybe you have to go to 30. And we're going to talk about how did you get introduced to that client? What was the true lead source? I remember I had a client, and it turns out they sold IT services. And the lead source turned out to be the golf league buddies of one of the partners. Tough to duplicate that. You tell the guy to go play more golf. What is the true lead source? If it's your cousin who's in the insurance business that meets everybody, well, then it's time to suck up to your cousin and get more leads if that's what's working. What was the point of receptivity for the client? Why did they have a conversation with you? What is it that closed the deal? Why did they buy from you? And then once you do that, what you're going to figure out is what used to work. What used to work. We did this once. We found out with a client, of their top 20 customers, the newest customer was 9 years old. That was the big aha. Holy smokes, we haven't acquired a major customer in 9 years. And that became the mission, is we got to find a way to get a new customer, because clearly what used to work was not working. So how does the methodology that got you what you have still work? If so, great. Let's do more of it. But what are your competitors doing to get leads? Are you getting all your leads from the yellow pages and they're getting them all from Yelp or Google Places? If so, maybe there's a best practice to borrow there from them. And then one of the things that I'm going to recommend for everyone on the call is, if you do not currently have Google Analytics installed on your website, you need to do so. It is not difficult. It is not expensive to do so. But what Google Analytics will do for your website is let you know where your traffic is coming from, what countries, a whole bunch of really snazzy stuff you can do on Google. So for instance, here is one of my clients, partydirect.com, and their Google Analytics site. So we can play with this just a little bit, and we'll do it quickly because yours will be much more interesting. But here's their day-to-day traffic for the month, and you can bring that over years if you want, that they're getting 45% from search traffic, 5% from referrals, and 50% direct. See, that 50% direct is not acceptable. I've got sites where that's under 5%, and that's what we want. I want it all coming from Google. On that front, here are the keywords that actually the traffic is coming in on. This is what's interesting, is that you can literally see the keywords that is driving people to your site. So then you can either create custom landing pages. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but the point is this is part of an automated lead funnel, and without Google Analytics, which is completely and totally free, you cannot do this. So this may make for a good online, offline conversation for your local marketing groups. This would be a good one right here. But by the end of the course, I'd like everyone to have Google Analytics installed on their site and be using it. Still under the topic of getting more leads, the next thing that we need to do is be able to understand our value equation. Meaning, let's take an example that I know. There's a radio station. They hire a well-known speaker in the industry to do a seminar or workshop. And here are their numbers. That for $50, they can acquire an RSVP. They do a big postcard campaign, they do some telemarketing, they do some networking, etc. So it costs them $50 to get an RSVP. So let's say they get 100 RSVPs, they've got $5,000 in that. 50% of the RSVPs show up. That means that it costs them $100 to get a person into the room. Of those people in the room, 20% take a meeting. Now they're at a $500 meeting. They end up closing about a third of the people they meet with, which means it costs them $1,500 to get a client, and the average value to them in margin, not in sales, in margin, is about $5,000 per client. So if you can acquire a client for $1,500 and the average value of the client is $5,000, we want to hire as many of those as possible. But this is one of the cornerstones of the program. You have to know these numbers. And now we're going to work to get the cost of the client down. That is what the sales virtualization program will do, is we'll lower the cost of getting the client, but we want to create a predictable program where we can just go over and flip a switch and know that we can generate meetings for $500. But I remember doing this exercise with a client, and he sells very expensive software development. Sometimes it's $1 million for this package. And we figured out that a quality meeting, and we decided to segment this, a meeting versus a quality meeting, because he had hired an appointment setter, and a lot of the meetings weren't quality. So we kind of went through the exercise, and we said, what is a quality meeting with a prospect worth? And it was $5,000, that he could literally say that a meeting of quality was worth $5,000, and then it just becomes math. How many average meetings you have to go on to get a quality meeting, etc. But how many of you have the guts to pay $5,000 for a quality meeting? And I'll be frank, that makes me squeamish, the thought of paying $5,000. But here's the reality of it. We're already doing it. You're already spending a ton of money on your sales and marketing system, your personal effort, all your website activity. If you add it up, the cost of your sales and marketing activity, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars that you're spending. And the fact is that yields X number of appointments and X amount of new business, and it has a number, so we might as well run it. And if it's $5,000, it's $5,000. So the good news for him was we knew that if we could generate $2,500 quality appointments, we were making money. It's a key performance indicator. And lastly, we'll call this the neutron option, meaning if none of this stuff works, like you're a travel agency. Let's say that you were a travel agency 15 years ago, and so this is the way we always generated leads. This is the way that we used to do it. This is what always worked, and we do all the things that we talked about. I don't know that the business model of a travel agency will make any of the things that we've talked about actually work, and what it may take is actually a business model change. Things like a massive shift in buyer behavior. I read a statistic that versus the 50s, Americans eat out 3 times more often than they did in the 1950s. And so if you've got some of these massive changes going on, like for instance, we just keep trying and it keeps not working, then that may be time to actually, the issue isn't sales virtualization, it's in part sales virtualization, but trying harder at the wrong plan isn't going to do it. I think that in that case, it takes a business model change. So I will just point you to a couple of resources that we've created, the Business Model Evaluator, which you can find at that link. And you can also we have a Business Model Secrets course as well that if you really want to get into it and you're a business model freak like me, you can get into. But the Business Model Evaluator is in fact free. I recommend you take the long version. It's much more accurate. But feel free to take that. Lots of good content there. All right, let's talk about number 2. The second goal is to close more effectively. Goal number 2, closing more effectively. Let's take the leads. Excuse me. So much for wetting my whistle. Closing more effectively. How do we close leads more effectively? Well, there's several things that we're going to do, 4 of them in fact. Number 1, let's stop giving good leads to bad salespeople. I'll get into this in detail, but this is a huge problem that I think that we underestimate the size and magnitude of how much money we're wasting giving quality leads to non-quality salespeople. Secondly, better matching our process to the buyer's psychological process. The third, reputation management and creating a tighter sales process. We call that a sales map, and the 5-page exercise that I alluded to with the customer analysis actually comes from our sales mapping process, which is what we call the process, which is 9 steps of creating this tighter sales process. And so the exercise you got is actually step 1 in that process. So let's go through the exercise. This is the exact same chart I used in the preview call, but we're going to talk about it in a different way. I'll spare you what I already talked about. But what I want to talk about is the superstar. Remember, we talked about the person that closed 60% of the SOBs, and we're going to call that the gold standard. that if the gold standard of salespeople, and we've all had this person, can turn lemons into lemonade, where we give the exact same lead to somebody else and they manage somehow to not close it, what I want to focus on is just how much money we lose as an organization giving quality leads to non-quality salespeople. So this is one of the 9 exercises that I have given you, is I want you to set your gold standard. Who is the gold standard for sales? And I'll tell you what, I'm going to be a little tough on you here, and that is I don't want you to put down what you think the gold standard can be, because that's just happenstance, unless you want to take your own performance and extrapolate it. But I have a rule about extrapolating owner performance. You really can do it better than everyone else. You know, a lot of owners say no one can do it as well as me, and people go, oh yeah, that's just entrepreneurial bravado. Well, it's not. A lot of times it's actually true. And so here's what you can do. You can take your performance and you can extrapolate it, but I then want you to take it times 0.75. So if you will deflate it by 25%, you can use your own performance. But I want you to find something historical, not this they should be able to do it. An actual number, what is the gold standard? Then I want you to run your salespeople through on a very similar analysis. I have this spreadsheet in Excel form where you can play with the numbers and punch it in there, and I want you to figure out exactly how much money those bad salespeople are costing you in dollars of lost margin. It'll probably turn your stomach, and you'll either be mad at yourself or me or both. But I want you to do it, because I think that what we can do is that if we virtualize the front of the sales process, which we'll show you how to do, we can have better leads for fewer salespeople, and that means we don't need to put up with bad ones. And that's the goal, because I don't want bad salespeople ruining good leads. So ask yourself, what if every single salesperson was as good as your best one, or as good as you? How much would that mean to your organization? A couple of other thoughts that are along the same lines. Secondly, how much money organization-wide do you spend not closing deals? Meaning, think about how much money it costs to take a prospect out to lunch, especially if you have to drive or go out of town to do so, or to visit a customer. You know, if you have an organization that spends $500,000 a year and you close 30% of the deals, it means that you spend $350,000 a year not closing deals, that you spend more money not closing deals than you spend closing deals, which is why we want to virtualize, because we want to try to take some, that's what's on the table, is that 350. That 350 grand is what's on the table for us, that we can take that 350, and I think we can cut it in half. I think that we can, you can't get rid of all of it, not everybody buys. But what if we could cut that wasted time we spend talking to people that don't buy, which typically means they're a bad prospect? And what we're going to do is we're going to do it up front. And we'll talk about exactly how you do that. And one of the ways that we do that is by lead scoring. This is how we get the good leads to the good salespeople, because lead scoring tells us which leads are good and which leads are not good. This is another item that I gave you in the packet of information, that there is a PowerPoint. A lot of it was borrowed from a company called Marketo. It's like market with a O on the end. Marketo. And this is a very high-end $100,000 plugin for Salesforce.com. So it probably isn't for all of us, but it is a strong product that a lot of great companies use, and they do a terrific job on their website explaining lead scoring if you want to do it. What I tried to do was take their 100 PowerPoint slide and turn it into 5 that mattered to us. But it's real simple. Lead scoring takes two dynamics. One is a traditional demographic profile. What's the size of business? How many employees? How long you've been in business? What's the phone system that you use? What's your position at the company? Are you male or female? How long have you, how old are you? Whatever it would be. Numbers. Things that are typically in a database that we can buy. And traditionally, that's how we scored leads. Oh, we sell 80% to women, and our typical buyer is a 35 to 45-year-old woman who owns her own business, and the company size is X. Well, great. That very well may be true. But basically, if it's in a database that we can buy, that is the demographic profile. What we do with lead scoring, and where it really gets interesting, is that we attach action to it. Because if a 45-year-old woman that owns her own company is typically the profile, but she keeps on not doing things that buyers do, and I've got a 18-year-old male who doesn't fit the profile at all, but he takes all the action that buyers do, which is the better prospect? And I would say typically it's the 18-year-old male in this case, because he is doing the things that buyers do but does not have the demographics. And so we will take both of those factors into account, but at some point taking the action becomes what scores the lead higher. And if we do that structured sales process like I talked about, and I call this hoop jumping, I don't mean it in a negative way, I mean that we have basically set up a 9-hoop process, and then if it makes sense and we don't ask the prospect to jump too far or too high, we can get the prospect to hoop jump if we mirror their buying logic and don't ask too much of them. We can nice and gently hoop jump them right where we're going, and then the point is we just measure who's hoop jumping and who is not, because that is the action that buyers will take, and that becomes part of our lead scoring. A lot of CRM, like we use Infusionsoft here, Infusionsoft actually will lead score built into the CRM package. So for instance, what do you do if you sell to presidents or owners of company, but the secretary of what looks to be a great prospect calls in? Is that a good lead or a bad lead? Well, lead scoring takes care of that. That basically they get a whole bunch of points for meeting the demographic, but now you don't have the right buyer, and so it might subtract points or add points. So you could literally, the good news is you just make this up. So if I go, okay, they meet the demographic profile, but I don't have all the buyers, or committees are bad, so therefore if it's a committee buyer, it's minus 10 points, and if it is a sole decision maker and we have the sole decision maker, it could be plus 10. And then we just weigh those. Make sense? All right, I alluded to this, but what we want to do is we want to have our process, our sales map, logically match the buyer's psychological process. So if I walked into a car dealership and the first thing they did was hand me a contract, that would not be a good process. It's not moving the way that the prospect expects things to move. A really easy example of this is, I'm guessing that you have been to a web page where you wanted something, and then they made you fill out, your dog tag number and the last 4 of your social security number, etc., and they just wanted too much information too fast, that they were hoop jumping you either too far or too fast, and what'd you do? You left. You exited their sales process because they did a bad job of matching your buyer psychology with their process. If we do a better job of that, we will get the prospects to move along our process the way that we want them to. Another thing that is, it's tough for me to sell this to clients, but once I do, they see the power of this and it works. And it's a little scary here. Here's what I'm alluding to, is I do not follow the conventional wisdom of ignoring objections. So for instance, if 50% of the people that we talk to say, oh my gosh, your product is expensive, traditional wisdom would say, shake out the 50% that think it's too expensive and shut up on the other 50. And I say, no, do not do that. And here's why. I would contend that an objection is a problem as soon as the buyer forms the thought in their mind, not as soon as they speak it. Because if I say, dang, that's expensive, those are just words. Those words came from a thought, and that thought is probably something along the lines of, this is not a good deal. I can buy something else cheaper. There's a very, very negative thought at the core of my belief that led to the words that are the objection. And I believe that we have to cut off the thought, not the words. And that means we got to do it early, and that means we got to be gutsy about it. And so yes, it's the best objection is the one you don't get, but it's the one that never forms in the prospect's head. And so I say you deal with all the objections, because then we can spin them the way that we want to. And then that is part of our structured sales process. So we deal with the objections when they make sense to deal with them. We deal with them in our way, and we can very positively spin those objections. Yes, ours is incredibly expensive, and here's why. It's because we don't cut corners. It's because we use the best ingredients, whatever the reasons are. You're not just charging more for no reason. You're doing it for a reason, and we need to share that with the prospect before they even begin to sniff of that objection. And then a little bit more on reputation management. This is a highly, highly under-leveraged area for most mid-sized businesses. And there are two versions of reputation management. There is the positive version of reputation management. I was emailing a client who's actually on this call, or maybe on this call, who is calling in from South Carolina because he is going to be on television and getting a big press release that his package is being implemented in a municipality in South Carolina. That is a positive version of reputation management. It's basically PR, but what it does is it shows your clients that it's a good idea to do business with you because other people have it. You're managing the reputation via other clients and PR. The one that I'm more worried about for most of us is the negative version of reputation management, meaning Google yourself. Go Google yourself and or Google your company just like a client would. What do you see? Do you see XYZ company sucks? Do you see bad reviews? I remembered I actually Googled one of my competitors, and there's a god-awful, horrid site called Glassdoor. If you want to be scared to death or be thankful you're a small company, go to glassdoor.com, where employees can basically bitch about their employer, and employers have no rights whatsoever. And I Googled one of my competitors, and they had a very prominent, nasty review on glassdoor.com. Well, what happens when the prospect sees that? That is bad reputation management. But the one that I think is a problem is when someone Googles something that they think they should find you, and they don't. Or they find, it's not so much finding something negative, it's the absence of finding something positive. And so in this environment, this combination of good branding plus good reputation management is the winner. That's how small companies and mid-sized companies like ours win, is by good branding plus all those components of reputation management. So for instance, I alluded to this one before, but I was looking for, what was I looking for? It was basically franchise social media expert. So I Googled franchise social media. And I found this guy, and this guy did a great job of getting on page one. So from reputation management perspective, he was kicking butt. He had like 3 listings on page one for franchise social media. So here's this social media expert, and I go to his webpage, and it looked okay. It wasn't bad. And then he has his Twitter button. So I go, well, shoot, he's a social media expert. So I go to his Twitter page. And here's what I find on his Twitter page. He has one entire tweet, Mr. Social Media Expert. He is following 54 people, and he has a whopping 13 people that are following him. Now, I'm guessing that you're going to go the exact same place I went. Is this guy a social media expert? No. So he has blown that reputation management opportunity. And let me ask you this. Can he ever fix it? You know, I always said that in law school. You can't unring a bell. He cannot unring this bell. This guy's never going to get business from me because he is not a social media expert, and he claims to be one. He blew the reputation management piece. On the flip side of that, this is a client of mine named John Arnold. He goes by Jonathan, at a company called Tuitive that actually does website usability, that they do sites for like Eli Lilly, where they basically connect the programming piece with how the user experience should be in the mind of the user. So they do some of what we're talking about, but from a technological point of view. So if you are going, John Arnold is a common name, so I had to add Tuitive. But if you go Google John, here's what you're going to find. Everything on page one is his. There he is on Vimeo. I would expect someone who is web savvy to be on some of these sites. For instance, I expect to find your Facebook page if you say we get social media, or your clients need to think you get social media, you better be on Twitter and Facebook, and you better look decent on Facebook. I had to spank a client a couple of months ago because they insisted on putting their Facebook thing on there, and they had like 3 followers, and it was the brother of the owner type thing. Take it off. Don't put your Facebook logo or connection on there if it isn't a positive experience. You're better off not to have it. But so John's savvy in this stuff, so we click through, we go to John's Vimeo page, and there's a nice looking picture of John. Here's some great videos. John does great graphical stuff, but you can see John doesn't have a lot of stuff up there, but the stuff he has is of great quality, makes him look good, and it's kind of a check next. That reputation management done right for us is probably nothing more than a check next. But if you do it wrong, you get the can't unring the bell issue. Next item, creating a structured sales process, that sales map that we're talking about. And I'm going to go forward a slide and come back. What a sales map looks like is something like this. It's basically, for all intents and purposes, a really fancy flow chart that we are going to flow chart our sales process. So this one that you're looking at is actually one of 6 flow charts or sales maps that we did for a company that sold hardwood flooring, wholesale hardwood flooring. And this is their sales map. And the red boxes mean something. It doesn't matter what they mean. And the shapes mean something and all of that. But the point is, prospects don't do 1,000 different things. They do 2, 3, 4 different things. And if we're really clever, we can make a move that I call a forced fork in the road, meaning that we can literally, remember the old alternative choice? Do you want that in red or blue? That's a forced fork in the road. What it does is it's basically, do you want it red, blue, or do you not want it at all? It's 3 options. And so now we create a fork with 3 options. We play all 3 of those options. If we're really clever, we bring it back to one point. But if we can structure our sales process, and this is a difficult task. It is not easy, it is not fun, and it's high skill. However, I would contend that the difference between your great salespeople and your average salespeople is that, you know how they say great salespeople can sell anything at any company? You know why? Because they know how to do a sales map in their head intuitively. They walk into a situation and they're selling ice machines today, and they figure out the process of selling ice machines. You don't need to know anything about ice machines to sell them. You just need to know how to sell ice machines. And then next month, they're out selling something else. Why? Because they use a similar sales map to do that. And so the great salespeople all have this in their head. That's one of the tricks, is you suck it out of the heads of the smart women and men that have already figured it out. They know how to do it, but what we do is we get it on paper, and then we own our sales process, not our great salespeople. The benefits of doing a sales map is here's the beautiful part, it makes your average people significantly better, because now you give them what they were lacking, a great process. It makes it much easier to come up with these great one-liners. Everybody goes, oh my gosh, how'd you think of saying that? Or these great salespeople always know just what to say. It's because they've got the prospect on rails. If the prospect's only going to do 3 different things, it's not that hard to think of what they might be and what your great one-liner is going to be as well. It allows the whole organization to follow along, meaning if we have stages, then the customer service people knows where this prospect is in the process, etc. And then the most important part, having done lots of these for clients, is it uncovers holes in the current process. Every time we do one of these, we start making these and you start going down all these different paths, and then you realize, holy smokes, we just hit a dead end. That we have no digital assets. We need to be able to send them a how-to video on how to do this, and we don't have the how-to video. And what happens is it unearths these, that by doing this process, we will unearth what is missing in our current process. And then lastly, lowering the cost of selling stuff. Step 1 of lowering cost is we are going to identify what I will call wasteful legacy systems. I know that that's a computer term, but by legacy systems, what I mean is the way we've always done it. We all know what legacy systems are in computers. They're those old things that we can't ever seem to get rid of because it's cheaper to keep them than to get rid of them. Well, that ain't true in sales, because we're not stuck with an old mainframe IBM computer. We can change. The problem with legacy systems is the inertia of human beings. And so some of the things that I see in legacy sales systems that typically need to get changed, and you'll have to figure out which of these apply to you, is number 1, human beings are the most expensive machine on earth. I can buy a $100,000 piece of equipment that is significantly cheaper than a human being. Somebody run the math for me. In fact, I'll run it. I'm going to pull up a calculator. What's minimum wage? Like $7.50 an hour, something like that? Okay, so if I have a $7.50 human being, 7.5 times 2,200 hours in a year times 1.11, 11% for all the FICA tax and all that stuff, and let's say that the machine we were going to buy instead of the human lasted 7 years, that is $128,205. So a $7 a person over 7 years costs us $128,000, not including the grief. The point is that human beings are the most expensive way to do anything in an organization. I am not anti-employee. I am anti-wasting money. And so having people meet people in person when they don't need to. I remember I sat at a meeting at Eli Lilly in 2000, long before WebEx, and there were directors, all of which probably made $400,000 at the time, 20 of them from all around the world, fly into Indianapolis for a 2-day meeting to do a bunch of things, including see a demo of this software that today you would have done on WebEx, and you're going, my gosh, how much did that meeting cost? And the answer was hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in that meeting face-to-face. So here's my list of potential areas that we could attack. Human beings delivering information early in the process. And the overarching category of this is, does a human being need to do it at all? There are things that only human beings can do. Developing relationships. What I call babysitting, meaning I have clients in the alarm business. And in the alarm business, at some point, you got to get pen to paper, and it works much better if someone actually walks them through that contract versus doing it, say, on a website where it was self-service. It's a nasty contract. It's hard to get people through, and it just works a lot better if you, what I call, assign a babysitter, meaning you just have somebody do it with them, because they either won't do it if you don't assign the babysitter, or it just works better if there's 2 people in the process, one of them being a salesperson. Well, that's a good use of a human being because it won't work otherwise. But things like brochures and printed paper, I know people that have started businesses like franchises where traditionally the first thing you did was mail a $5 brochure to someone in the mail that literally have 0 printed materials, none, no printed materials, all digital. Insisting on a live interaction. We must go to coffee. Think about voicemail. The real power of voicemail is that it breaks the transaction in half. You need to talk to me. I need to talk to you. We don't need to talk to each other live many times in order to move it forward. All we need to do is have you leave me a voicemail, me leave you a voicemail. You leave me a voicemail. That's a separated interaction. There's lots of things in every single person's sales process where we're forcing those to be integrated interactions, not separated. We separate them, we can digitize them, and we can make them less expensive. Live meetings versus virtual meetings, obviously, things like WebEx. And think partial on this. This is a real challenge, and some people are better at it than others. But don't think 100% or 0% on these things. It doesn't have to be a WebEx versus a live meeting, but maybe it could be half of the process with WebEx and then a live meeting. I mean, just for instance, I remember my boss was about ready to kill me at this software company I worked for because I literally told Toshiba that I was only going to come out to LA one time. That what I did was just insist that we clear some of these initial hurdles, because you know how it's going to go. You're going to go out there, and it's going to be blah, blah, blah. Come back and do the real demo later. And I said, I'm only coming out there once. And I could do it because I, A, knew our process. I knew that I had a qualified prospect. I knew that they at least wanted to look at what we had. And I knew that I could do some preliminary hoop jumping virtually instead of live. And they did it. And I got Toshiba to do some very significant hoop jumping, and I only went out there once. Re-engineering the information supply chain, meaning the client needs information from you before they're going to buy. So I use this little computer-human computer repeat system, and that's, some of you are going to be going, huh? I don't want to do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. The whole point is that right now most expensive sales processes are human, 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 buy. And what I want to do is cut out the cost of a lot of those human interactions, because back to our ATM analogy, that if I want money at 11 o'clock, a human is not the best option because the bank's not open. An ATM is a better option, a non-human. So if we design our process right, if we virtualize our process right, the non-humans will do a better job than the humans, and it will be much cheaper. So just to keep it simple, we want to go, digital asset, human, digital asset, and then repeat, because here's the key. And this is absolutely critical, that we must change our thinking. When these digital assets first came out, whether it be ebooks, that what these did is they became substitutions for physical products. That we had an e-brochure instead of a catalog, that we had an online catalog instead of a catalog. And all this stuff did was support human beings. and I want to flip that. If you really want the most benefit out of this, you got to flip it, that the humans support the digital assets, not the digital assets support the humans. Make sense? So what we want is we want to create a system where our human machines do the tasks that can only be performed by humans, which is going to be a lot. It's going to probably be, ideally, a very small percentage of the first half of the sales process and a very large percent of the last process. You know, we can't build much in the form of relationships with the machine. We can't do some of the education. We can't do much, if any, of the closing unless it's transactional. And that babysitting part is not to be underestimated. I mean, I kind of make it a funny word just to lighten things up. But there are times when the client just needs you there. I have people that have to give a plant tour in order to really get the deal. That the plant tour, you know, clears the deal. You don't think that they'll go drive and pick somebody up and drive them back to get the plant tour? If it's part of the sales process, we will, but that's babysitting. I mean, that's just a human being ensuring that the step that needs to get done next gets done. And a machine can't do that because the client's left at their own discretion and they're not doing what we need when we need it. Interject human being. So we need to create these digital assets. Back to, I promise that universally, we've got a lot of people on the call. I would hate to add up the shortage of digital assets that we have. This is always at the root of the problem. I promise you're going to be frustrated. Do not worry about it. It will be fine. This is a process, not an event, getting this fixed. But in moving to a better sales process and virtualizing your sales process, what you will find is that you probably have a dearth of digital assets, meaning the things that the toolbox that we need to get this done. You're probably short, and a lot of it tends to be video. It doesn't have to be. That's not me telling you it's video. I'm saying my experience says it tends to be video. So here are some examples of the digital assets that we're going to want to create. I love video FAQs, which is just basically a text-based FAQs. People won't read. You'll be lucky if they skim in video. How-to videos. These are great for customer service and cutting our customer service costs. 1-minute teaser videos, which really are not much different than a TV commercial. Actual TV commercials. Who said a commercial had to be played on TV? We could do a commercial just for YouTube. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't even need to be professionally produced. But a semi-professionally produced commercial does not cost anywhere near as much as you think. I mean, for instance, I had a client that had a legal life, like a legal hotline, friends and family for all the actors, and one of those, religious stations that broadcast for the editing of the commercial and the shooting of the commercial. And we shot 3 30-second commercials that did go on TV for $1,000. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money. TV or radio interviews for your reputation management. If you do a TV interview or a radio interview, those are great for reputation management, and those are digital assets to be used over and over and over again. You want to get really fancy, you could podcast them on iTunes. White papers or ebooks, special reports, a message from the owner. Boy, this is one that people really underestimate. Come on, customers want to know that you, the owner, care about them. Who said it had to be one-off every time? You could have a message from the owner for new employees is great. Hi, this is Jim. I want to welcome you to the company. I'm really looking forward to having lunch with you on Wednesday with the group that we're going out with. But in the meantime, I want to say welcome to the company, and we're really glad to have you on board. Much better than some stupid letter or whatever it would be. Product introductions, virtual plant tours. Have a client that makes furniture in China. And their sales process was get the guy over to China to see the plant, because once he sees the plant, then we're going to have a much higher, this was a process that they had used for 20 years successfully. And it took me a while, but I convinced them that, yes, I agree that that plant tour was important, but they were having 2 problems. Number one, getting the guy to carve out a week to go over on an airplane to China, the cost of doing so, who paid for it. And then number 2, theft. People were saying, hey, thanks for the introduction to the factory. We're not going to cut you out of the loop, because they were quality control reps, and the introduction to the factory, they didn't own it. They partly owned it, and they would just try to go around them. So we finally did a virtual plant tour, because what we discovered was they really didn't want to see the people stapling boxes and putting legs on there. What they wanted to see, that it was not some dirt hut out in the middle of nowhere. It was a reputation management issue. It really wasn't about the plant tour. They just wanted to make sure the plant was okay. And so we, took pictures of these big complexes and, the basketball court that they had and the swimming pool that they had, and that the workers were treated okay, and that they had modern equipment and that it was done right. And you could very easily do that through a series of videos. What we did was a 1-minute video that was boom, 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 give it a minute and you can check it out. And a lot of times that 1-minute video earns you their time on the second video. That's the other thing. I always say on direct mail that the first thing you get is about 2 seconds while they wave it in front of their head to the trash can. And then if you can get that 2 seconds to work, then you get about 5 seconds, 10 seconds of skimming. And then that 5 or 10 seconds of skimming gets them to actually read it. But how many of us write a piece of direct mail like that? We don't. We read it as if everybody's going to read it because, after all, this is my stuff, and my stuff is very important to me. Well, it is important to us. It's not important to the clients yet. And so we have to play with their very low attention spans. And then I love video testimonials. It always cracks me up, these people that have written testimonials on their website. I can type just fine. Jack Welch says Jim Muehlhausen is one of the brightest business minds of our time. Sincerely, Jack Welch, former president of GE. President Bush says Jim Muehlhausen is a GE. I can type. Who's to say the credibility of those testimonials? Your testimonials must be video in order to be credible. I'll take an audio testimonial. That's not bad. But a video testimonial is much, 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 much more credible than anything else. I carry a flip camera with me, just in case. Everybody's got a cell phone that'll shoot video. It doesn't need to be professionally produced. It just needs to be real and credible. But start working on video testimonials. One of the things that has been very successful for me personally is I now have about 50 video testimonials that I've been working on getting for about a year, and I get about 10 every time I speak at a big event. And now all of a sudden you start going to a big either convention or a marketing partner like a bank or something, and you start going, okay, wow, this guy got this many people on video. They don't even need to watch him. They just go, man, he's got 50 people on video. How bad can he be? It's a reputation management issue. Re-engineering a portion of how we sell. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But we want to move to that education-based selling. That we are, sell is a 4-letter word. We're going to educate the customer on what they are willing to be educated on, and we're going to walk them up the ladder towards where they need to end up, but we're not going to start there. We're going to balance the cost of sales with the value of sales, meaning, assigning that babysitter to, maybe it's worth driving to get the prospect to take them on the plant tour. Maybe it's not. We're going to create that information ATM, because once we create it, it's one of our most productive and valuable assets within the company. We're going to give our best leads to the best salespeople, and we're going to structure our sales process or create more of a structured sales process. On the topic of education versus selling, 4-letter words, selling's practically illegal these days, especially the younger kids. They think sales is bad. They want to buy. And so we've got to make our process at least look like buying. But that doesn't mean that we can't persuade. It doesn't mean that we can't give information that's helpful, but we have to do it in a way that they want to buy. And keep in mind that prospects are now paying us. You've heard about the attention economy. Prospects pay us with their time, then their money. I'm going to repeat that. Prospects first pay us with their time, then they pay us with their money. And so if they're going to invest their time, we have to make it worth their time. And back to that receptivity exercise, where will they spend their time? Where will they give you their time? That's where we start. All right, balancing the cost of sales with the value of the sales. Most sales processes treat all prospects like they are created equally, and they're not. And the good news is, because we're going to virtualize some of this and make it no cost, we can segment prospects quickly, easily, and effectively. So for instance, if the President of the United States calls in, we don't need to send him through the email campaign. We can just jump him right on in to my office, and I'll be more than happy to talk to him directly should the President call me. So let's just take an example. And also keep in mind that they don't take the same process to close. That if we create a 9-step process and somebody's on step 5 and they start waving their money around, we don't have to do step 6. We can jump them to step 9. So let's just take 4 prospects And let's use the example of a car dealer. It's something everybody understands. So prospect 1, 3 teenage boys with skateboards walk into the dealership. What is the, and what I'm really talking about is how much money we spend trying to sell them. That's what we're talking about. This balancing is how much time, energy, and effort do we spend trying to sell them. I am not a fan of taking any prospect and just ditching them. All prospects are good prospects. However, what I want to do is automate the bad prospects, that the bad prospects get put into a free cost loop until they raise their hand enough time to tell us that they're worth being in a more expensive, more time-intensive process. And so that's where these teenage boys are going to do. We're going to send them over to an information kiosk, but we are not taking them on a test drive until they do something to show us that they're better prospects. Well, how about the 25-year-old professional woman? She very well may be a terrific buyer. She also may be someone that doesn't have the money to buy a car. So this one's probably going to be somewhere between the president walking in and the boys with the skateboards. That maybe we will do some qualification on her. We may send her to an information kiosk. We may tell her to look around. We may see how long she sticks around, etc. But we can create a process to effectively deal with someone like that. Now, how about prospect number 3? Now it's getting more interesting. So now I've got a 50-ish man coming in with a 25-year-old woman that appears to be his daughter, a la daddy looking for a car for his girl. This sounds like a pretty good prospect because, A, I've got 2 potential buyers. He could just be helping her buy it, or he could be buying it for her. Do you go tell this person to go over to the information kiosk and look at cars, or do you immediately jump to a test drive? I don't know the answer. I'm not going to throw out the answer. But the point is, this one probably has more money attached to the prospect than the other ones, and effectively we're quickly lead scoring these. Or the last one, how about an existing customer who calls to test drive a new car? My car is coming off lease. I want to buy another one. Can I come in and drive a test? Well, that's a great prospect, someone that's already demonstrated that they'll give you money. And so I like the word commitment tests. And this really comes into lead scoring, meaning we can design, this is part of sales mapping, we can design a commitment test into the process. So for instance, if notice whenever you do a test drive, they always want a photocopy of your driver's license, or when you want to make a bid on a car, they want $200. Those are commitment tests. If you won't give them $50 to make a bid on the car, their contention is that you're not that serious. That's a commitment test. It is process driven. They're not doing it to mess with you. They're doing it to test how serious you are and test your actions, not just make guesses about how you appear because you wore a suit instead of shorts. So we want to come up with, and this is not one of the exercises, but maybe it'll be a future one, is commitment tests are something that we actually want to build into the process. So for instance, I will tell you a commitment test that I use. I have an hour-long video FAQ that I use for certain high-level prospects. And if they do not, and I can track whether they click that video. I can't effectively track whether they watch the video, but I can track whether they click it or not. And basically, that's a forced fork in the road. People in my process that do not click that video get no human attention until they do. They get a robocall, they get a bunch of things, but they get no humans. If they do click it, they get intense human attention because they have now passed the second. That's the second of 2 commitment tests. And once they pass the second of the commitment test, now we go, hey, this person is worth spending some organizational money on. Using an information ATM, and this is typically a video FAQ. I'll show you a couple examples. In fact, let me just forward to one. This is a good video FAQ. They actually used to have a slicker one, but now they're using YouTube, and I'm sure they just want the views on YouTube. But this is a company, and I sent you a link in the overview. It's actually, you can find the link in that PDF that I sent you. This is a company called Recreation Unlimited, and for those of you that aren't, it's Recreation Unltd, unltd.com. But as you can see, how are Gorilla goals different? How much will a Gorilla system cost? Is the Gorilla system easy to install? How do I purchase a Gorilla Goal, which is a manufacturer here in Indiana? Why buy from Recreation Unlimited? What are people saying about Gorilla Goals? And so the point is that they're called frequently asked questions for a reason. So this would be an example of what I am calling an information ATM. It's right there. This is their homepage. boom, here's a whole bunch of videos, and I know this company, they do a ton of business and goals, an amazing amount of business and goals. They do a great job. Those are professional actors. They actually hired a video crew. They hired professional actors to do this. Most of us don't need to do that. You really can probably do it with friends, family, sales staff, much like the legal line that I was telling you about. But don't be afraid to do it right. It's all about what it's worth, not what it's going to cost you. So if you will use something like an information ATM, which allows the customer instant access to what they want when they want it, what we're going to find is that we can actually improve our customer service, that we can lower costs because they're going to self-service and we're not going to have to service them. We can get more informed buyers, which means that by the time that we get to actually doing a sales call, they may be 75, 80% closed. Speed to beat the competition. This may not seem like a big deal, but let me give you a specific example. Anybody who is in IT knows that hiring a very talented woman or man for a programming position, especially if it's something like Java or something that's in demand, is very difficult, and anybody who's in that business has tried to hire someone and gotten beat by somebody else. So I have all of my IT companies create this info ATM for potential hires. Why working for ABC? Why should I work for ABC? What's it like to work for ABC? What's a day in the life of ABC? What kind of people work at ABC? Just the typical questions. And so now here's what has happened is that my clients now have informed a prospective employee who, hopefully has some interest. They applied for a job after all, that we instantly get them an hour's worth or half an hour's worth of very robust, interesting, video-based information on our company while everybody else is trying to set up a phone appointment. And it puts us in first place, that we now have better information to these people faster than other people do, and we get better hires because of it, which is competitive advantage. So it doesn't necessarily need to be sales related in order to do that. These things have very long shelf lives. You may have heard me mention on the preview call that I have a video FAQ that I have used for 6 years unaltered. It saves me countless hundreds of hours per year. And the other thing is, times have changed. Think about how many customers hit your website versus ring your phone. I already know the answer. It's 90+%. Most people, if they're not already a customer, okay, let me change that to prospects. People that are thinking about doing business with you don't know, like, and trust you yet. They just want the information that they want. And they don't necessarily want to get it from a human. And I would contend that 80+% of the people actually don't want to get it from a human. They would far rather hide in the bushes and get it from the internet and get it digitally where they don't need to deal with being sold. And that's part of mirroring the buyer's process. We want to do that for them because we're going to do better. And the good news is it's significantly easier and cheaper for us to do so. So let me show you some other examples. I'm sure you've experienced the real estate one. I mean, the web has dramatically altered the way that we all do real estate. So this is a big realtor. Actually, Tucker has the largest market share of any realtor in the United States vis-a-vis their market. And they're here in Indianapolis. They have a huge market share. So they have a very nice website, but I can go in there and say what area of town. I can go to a map. I can say, fine, I want to look at houses that have 4 to 6 bedrooms and 3 baths and this many square feet, and boom, here comes the map. I can see all the pictures from the inside. You almost could buy a house without going to it now. And that has dramatically changed the practice of real estate. I'm still waiting for it to affect pricing, but imagine if they didn't do it. Imagine if they kept their legacy system of, oh no, we got all these realtors that need to keep busy. You need to come look at the house. You can't virtually tour the house. They'd be getting crushed. Capital One. Look at these FAQs that Capital One has on their website for getting a car loan. I just bought my Lexus instead of leasing a new one. So I just went through this, but it was interesting because look at, what types of vehicles does it do? How can I purchase it? How long can I finance it? All of these questions. Think about it. 20 years ago, some human actually had to answer these questions for every single prospective car buyer. And think about what it did to rates. I mean, we pay those rates, but do you really want to call up Capital One and talk to somebody? They're going to try to upsell you on something, right? You don't want that. I don't want it. You just want the answers, and here they are, all nice and easy and ready for you. This one is my Gutsy Award. I put a link to this in the summary. This is a company called Aardvark Global Publishing, and they are a print-on-demand. So if you had a book and you wanted to print it, or you want to make a coffee table book of your kid's graduation or something, this is one of many print-on-demand places. But what I love about what they've done is that they have had the guts to put a price calculator on there, that you literally can go in there and get a absolute 100% accurate price quote. And if you're looking around, good luck finding somewhere else. I have actually bought books from these people because of this price calculator. I think in general that people are far too protective of their pricing, and that in general, I'll use the number 90% of us would be better off to put our pricing on there and be totally transparent with our pricing than to be totally non-transparent like we've been taught to be with our pricing. Because the fact of the matter is the client finds out anyway, and you gain huge advantage through transparency because no one else will give it up, and now you will, and you stand in first place. Fine, maybe you lose it, but my experience with the clients that have had the guts, and not a lot of them have, is you end up gaining business by putting a price calculator up there, not losing it. I know it's scary as heck. I'm with you, but in general, you should consider it. Here's the FAQ that I was telling you about. This is my FAQ for what I use. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to bribe you. This is a piece of software, this little holder, and what it does is it plays automatically, or you can click around. So you go, what are the benefits to me? You can just jump to that and it plays another 5-minute video, or it will just play them all in order. I paid a software company to write this little holder for me 6 years ago. It's actually pretty simple once you know how to use it. At the end of the program, I'm gonna bribe you, and if you'll give me a video testimonial, which I want and need, like I mentioned, I will give you the code to this. So you can steal my code if it's something that's interesting to you. Here is our class schedule. We've already covered the principles of sales virtualization, and these are all going to be between an hour and a half for these classes. Next week, we're going to cover the sales process re-engineering. We will jump ahead to lead generation and enhancing our lead generation in session 3. In session 4, we're going to talk about lead nurturing and scoring. Basically, how do we take this re-engineered process and push it into sales? And then last, we'll talk about structuring our sales process. And I have one little caveat for any of you that have seen the movie Dirty Dancing. There's a funny quote in there where the owner of the resort in upstate New York goes, kids don't want to come to resorts anymore. What they want is to see Europe, 22 countries in 3 days. And I want you not to be like the teenagers that want to do 22 countries in 3 days. We have covered a tremendous amount of material, even just in lesson 1. And this stuff isn't going to happen in 5 weeks. This stuff is going to take a while to get done, and it's a process, not a light switch. You don't flip it on. So be patient, please. This is not designed to change your world in 5 weeks. All right, I got one more slide, and then we can let everybody go. I want to give you some information on the local sessions, because part of getting this done and not having it turn into trying to do 22 countries in 3 days is these local implementation sessions where you can work with other people that are re-engineering their sales process and virtualizing their sales process. So we certainly didn't, these are tentatively scheduled for Thursday mornings depending on market, but what we didn't want is to have one tomorrow morning. That didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So we've got those delayed a week. So the first of those will be next week. And what we'll do, like for instance, we have quite a few people in the Philadelphia area that are on this. So we will have the people that are local to you get in contact with you. They'll be getting in contact with you tomorrow, and then we will try to make those available at people's discretion. So if we've got 10 people in Philadelphia, we don't want to say, hey, congratulations, it's at 9 o'clock on Thursday, and then 8 out of 10 people can't make it then. So we will try to work around everyone's schedule to do that. And if you are in a market, like for instance, Jeff, you and I worked together on the Business Model Secrets course. Thanks for coming back for this one. But I don't have anybody else in Cleveland that's on this. So what we will be doing for the people that are in a market where we didn't have a group is we'll just do a group on the phone. And so we'll combine all those people, and I'll lead those groups myself, and we'll do those on the phone so that you can have access to that same implementation session. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. What I will do, sometimes people get shy and they want to talk after it's over, which is fine. I'll stay on the line for a few minutes, but thanks everybody for your participation, and I hope we gave you plenty to think about.